A millionaire made a bet to marry a dirty beggar woman, what he later found out no one expected. Before we start the story, tell us in the comments which city you are watching us from. We hope you enjoy the story. The icy wind blew through the dark streets of the city, bringing with it the smell of rain and the distant murmur of hurried footsteps. The streetlights flickered faintly, casting elongated shadows on the damp sidewalks. In the corner of an alley, huddled against the cold wall of an old building, a woman hugged her own knees in an attempt to protect herself from the biting cold. Her name was Emily Carter, and her life had been an uninterrupted sequence of challenges and disappointments. Her face, marked by adversity, still bore traces of the beauty she had once possessed, but time and hardship had left their mark. Her clothes were worn. The thin fabric barely protected her from the cruel temperature of that night. People hurried past her. Some didn't even cast a glance in her direction, while others diverted their path as if her mere presence was a threat. To them, she was just one of many invisibles who roamed the city, trying to find a little warmth and dignity where there was no room for compassion. Emily sighed, feeling her stomach growl with hunger. He hadn't eaten anything substantial for 2 days, just small scraps he had found in garbage cans, but that was the reality he had learned to endure. On the other side of the city, in one of the most luxurious skyscrapers, a grandiose party was taking place. The hall was a spectacle of twinkling lights and extravagant decor. Champagne was poured in very thin glasses, while loud laughter and conversations about investments and exotic travel dominated the atmosphere. Among the guests, Liam Harrington stood out. Tall, charismatic, and with an aura of undeniable power, he was one of the most influential men in the city. His fortune had been built on successful business and a ruthless mindset in business. For him, emotions were unnecessary distractions. The world was a board and he always made the best moves. Next to him, a group of friends chatted animatedly. Among them, Oliver Sinclair, a shrewd businessman with an acid humor, watched Liam with a defiant look. "You always say money can buy everything, don't you?" Oliver asked, leaning forward slightly with a teasing smile. Liam raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of his drink before answering, "Because you can. Everything has a price, you just have to find the right amount." Oliver laughed and then pointed to the balcony of the building, indicating the movement on the street below. Under the dim light of a streetlight, Emily remained motionless, hugging herself for warmth. "Prove it," Oliver said, his voice full of defiance. "Marry that woman for 3 months and turn her into a lady of high society. If you can, I'll give you $5 million. The group laughed, finding the idea absurd and at the same time intriguing. The atmosphere was tense for a moment while everyone waited for Liam's reaction. He tilted his head slightly, watching the woman in the street. Something in his posture and the way his eyes reflected the light aroused a brief flash of curiosity in him. But it was just a game, a challenge like any other, and he never backed down in the face of a challenge. "Done?" Liam replied with a confident smile. The group erupted in laughter and high fives, while Oliver nodded, clearly pleased with the bet. Without hesitation, Liam climbed down from the building and walked decisively to Emily. She noticed his approach and shrank instinctively. She was used to being ignored or treated with contempt, but this man looked different. His presence exuded authority, as if he was used to having everything he wanted. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice firm but without aggressiveness. Emily lifted her chin, her expression hardening with suspicion. "If you are to offer me alms, keep your money. I don't need your pity." Liam smiled sideways, appreciating his answer. "It's not alms. It is a proposal. I want you to marry me for 3 months. In return, you will have enough housing, clothes, food, and money to change your life." She blinked, surprised, before laughing in disbelief. "You think you can buy anything, don't you?" Liam shrugged. "So far, I've never failed at that." Emily pursed her lips, her mind working quickly. The proposal was absurd. She didn't know this man, and clearly he wasn't doing it out of kindness. There was something behind it. But what if it was your only chance? How many opportunities like this would arise? No, and she knew it. What if I accept? What happens after these 3 months? You go on with your life with an amount that will allow you to start over far from here. I'll follow with mine. Simple as that. She hesitated. Something inside her screamed not to trust him, but the other part, the one who felt hungry and cold, knew that this could be the only way out. With a deep sigh, he made his decision. I accept. But don't think you can mold me the way you want. Liam smiled, satisfied. He didn't know it at the time, but that deal would change their lives forever. The black limousine pulled up softly next to the cold, damp sidewalk. The dark windows hid the man's face in the back seat, but the glare of the headlights reflected in the lone figure sitting on the floor, hugging his own body to protect himself from the icy wind of the early morning. Sophia looked up, her tired eyes finding the car door that opened slowly. A pair of perfectly polished shoes touched the pavement. A tall man, dressed in an impeccable suit, stepped out of the vehicle with an expression of complete indifference. Passers-by, few at that hour, even paid attention to the scene, but to Sophia, that moment seemed like an omen of something that would change her life forever. Get in the car. His voice was firm, with no room for objection. Sophia narrowed her eyes hesitantly. The day before felt like a blur in his mind. She remembered the arrogance of that man, the absurd proposal he had made, and above all, the feeling of despair that led her to accept. That still sounds crazy, he murmured, his voice full of suspicion. Leonardo, as he had introduced himself the night before, sighed, visibly impatient. You've already made your decision. There is no turning back now. The cold punished her skin, and Sophia knew she had no alternatives. Taking a deep breath, she stood up and got into the limousine. The soft padding under his body was a stark contrast to the hard sidewalks where he had slept for so many nights. The silence inside the car was heavy. Leonardo typed something on his cell phone without even casting a glance in his direction. Sophia, on the other hand, couldn't take her eyes off him. There was something about this man that bothered her deeply. He seemed unreachable, an impenetrable fortress of arrogance and control. Let's go straight to the registry office. The wedding will be officiated today. He finally broke the silence without taking his eyes off the phone screen. Sophia's heart raced. Everything was happening too fast. What if I change my mind? For the first time, Leonardo looked up. His cold, calculating eyes met hers. You accepted the deal, and I fulfill my part of what I promise. So I hope you do the same. Sophia clenched her fists. It was being bought. There was no other way to look at it, but deep down she knew that this deal gave her something she had long been denied. A chance. The limousine glided through the streets of the city, leaving behind the alleys where Sophia had spent the last few years. The car entered an upscale neighborhood, where modern buildings glowed with the morning light that was beginning to appear. The destination was a discreet registry office, where a few employees were already waiting for Leonardo's arrival. He got out of the car with the naturalness of someone who had already done that dozens of times. Sophia, on the other hand, hesitated before stepping on the ground. Every fiber of her body screamed that this was a mistake, but still, she moved on. Inside the registry office, the papers were ready. Everything had been previously organized, so that the process would be quick and discreet. Sophia held the pen, her fingers trembling slightly. Are you sure about that? She asked, her voice sounding firmer than she felt. Leonardo crossed his arms, his expression impenetrable. I don't take steps without absolute certainty. Sophia gave him one last look before signing. Her name, scribbled on paper, was now linked to that of a man she barely knew. Leonardo's signature came next. Without hesitation, without emotion, as if it were just another business contract, the justice of the peace pronounced the final words. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Vasquez. Sophia didn't know if that was a congratulation or a sentence. Leonardo wasted no time. As soon as they left the registry office, he signaled for them to take her to the next destination. Now let's take care of your appearance. Sophia stared at him, indignant. You talk as if I were an object that needs to be reformed. I speak as someone who has a clear goal. If we are going to do this, we will do it right. The limousine pulled up in front of a luxury boutique. Sophia felt a knot in her stomach. He knew that his appearance did not fit into that world. Her hair was unkempt, and her clothes had been the same for weeks. But something inside her refused to submit so easily. I don't need that. Leonardo tilted his head slightly, assessing it as if it were a problem to be solved. Do you want to live as my wife or as a stranger who doesn't belong in this world? The question hit Sophia like a blow. She didn't want to be an intruder. If I were to enter that game, I would play by my own rules. Without saying anything else, she walked into the boutique. The place was a true temple of fashion. Luxurious fabrics, shiny jewels, custom-made dresses. The saleswomen, upon noticing Leonardo's presence, ran to serve him, but he only pointed to Sophia. She needs a complete wardrobe. The employees hesitated for a second, analyzing Sophia from top to bottom. Sophia saw the doubt in their eyes. She didn't belong there, and everyone knew it. But then, a thought popped into his mind. I can make it work in my favor. She straightened up, lifted her chin and looked directly at the nearest employee. Let's get started. It was a long process. Hours of testing, tweaking and recommending. Silk dresses, thin-heeled shoes, expensive perfumes. Each piece he tried on was like a layer of protection against the past that tried to leave him behind. When he finally left the boutique, he was holding more bags than he had ever imagined in his life. Leonardo waited outside, impatient. Finally. Sophia rolled her eyes. It wasn't easy to turn a beggar into a lady of society, you know. Leonardo let out a short smile, but soon his expression returned to normal. Don't get used to it. This is just an agreement. Sophia felt a twinge in her chest. I haven't forgotten. The return trip was silent. When they arrived at Leonardo's mansion, Sophia felt small in the face of the grandeur of the place. The huge gates opened automatically, revealing an impeccably manicured garden and a building that looked more like a modern castle. When they entered, employees stopped what they were doing to observe her. Murmurs echoed through the halls, but no one dared to say anything out loud. Leonardo led her to the second floor, opening the door to a luxurious room. This will be your space for the next 3 months. Sophia entered, observing every detail. It was more than I could have imagined, but as beautiful as it was, that room was still a cage. Before leaving, Leonardo made a point of reinforcing, remember, this is just a deal. Don't expect anything more than that. When he closed the door, Sophia sat up on the soft bed, feeling the weight of her new reality. She had entered this game. But it wouldn't just be a play. The sun had barely risen when Sophia opened her eyes. The soft light penetrated through the heavy curtains, bathing the room in golden tones. It took her a few seconds to remember where she was. The soft mattress under her body, the fragrant sheets and the absolute silence were a stark contrast to the cold, noisy streets where she used to sleep. He sat up on the bed, running his hands over his face. Her first day as Leonardo's wife had begun. But in reality, that title meant little. She knew it wasn't a real marriage, just an agreement. A middle-aged woman knocked on the door, wearing an impeccable uniform. Miss Sophia, I am Marta, the housekeeper. Mr. Leonardo asked me to show him his routine starting today. Sophia sighed, already feeling the weight of what was to come. What kind of routine? I want you to adapt quickly. Starting today, she will have classes in etiquette, diction, posture, and fashion. Sophia arched her eyebrows. All this why? Marta kept her expression neutral. These are requirements of your role. The woman's professional tone made Sophia realize that, in that house, everyone followed orders without question. But she wasn't like them. He quickly dressed and went downstairs for breakfast. The table in the huge dining room was filled with fresh fruit, fine breads, and delicate china. Sitting at the bedside, Leonardo read a newspaper as if his presence were the most natural thing in the world. Did you sleep well? He asked without looking away from the pages. Sophia sat down at the table, grabbing a cup of coffee. It was different. Leonardo looked up at her, analyzing her for a moment. Today begins your transformation. I don't want you to embarrass me, she snorted, crossing her arms. What if I don't care what people think? Leonardo put the newspaper aside and leaned forward slightly. You should. The world is not kind to those who seem out of place. His words stayed in her mind all morning. Right after breakfast, Sophia was taken to her first challenge, the etiquette class. In the main hall of the mansion, a tall, thin woman with impeccable posture was waiting for her. His critical eyes analyzed Sophia from head to toe before she introduced herself. I'm Vivian, your instructor. Starting today, I'll teach you everything you need to know to behave like a true lady. Sophia tried not to roll her eyes. I only need to look elegant for 3 months, right? Vivian arched an eyebrow. You need to become someone who can walk into any environment without being questioned, and this requires more than appearance. The first lesson was simple, posture. But for Sophia, standing tall, balancing a book on her head, seemed like a punishment. With each step she took, the book fell, drawing impatient sighs from the instructor, less stiffness in the shoulders. Walk lightly. Then came the cutlery. Vivian arranged an impeccably arranged table, and with precise gestures taught how to hold each piece correctly. A formal dinner is a test of patience and subtlety. Never touch the glass before the host does. Use the napkin discreetly, and never make any noise when drinking the soup. Sophia crossed her arms, tired. That's ridiculous. Vivian smiled from the side. For those who have never needed to fit in, maybe it is. Her words hit her like a blade. For years, Sophia had no choice but to live on the margins, uncaring about the etiquette or rules imposed by society. But there, in that mansion, everything was different. The afternoon brought a new challenge: diction and language. Your tone of voice, the words you choose and the way you pronounce each syllable say a lot about you. The teacher said, handing him a book. Read this passage aloud. Sophia began to read, but was immediately interrupted, slower. Your pronunciation needs to be clear. Hours passed with relentless repetitions of phrases and breathing exercises. At first it seemed impossible, but as the day progressed, Sophia began to notice small changes. At the end of the afternoon, exhausted, she threw herself on the bed. Her muscles ached, her mind was overloaded, but a part of her refused to give up. If I'm going to go through this, then I'm going to leave here better than I entered. Leonardo observed everything from afar. For him it was just a gamble, but when he saw Sophia determined, something inside him began to change. Her transformation wasn't just a matter of appearance, she was shaping herself up for something much bigger. And, without realizing it, Leonardo began to ask himself, who was really changing in that process? Night came quietly at Leonardo's mansion. Soft lights illuminated the luxurious corridors, reflecting off the marble floors. Sophia was still awake, sitting in front of the mirror in her room. He observed his own reflection with a mixture of strangeness and curiosity. The elegant clothes, the neat hair, the clean skin, everything seemed to belong to someone else. She ran her fingers over the collar of the dress she was wearing. There were no longer the rough and dirty fabrics he had carried for so long. But despite the new appearance, inside she still felt like the same woman who slept on cold sidewalks and spent days not knowing when she would have her next meal. A knock on the door took her out of her thoughts. Come in. The door opened slowly, revealing Leonardo, impeccably dressed as always. He watched her for a moment before crossing his arms. Tomorrow you'll have an event to follow with me. It's a gala. Sophia arched her eyebrows. And you thought I'd be ready after a single day? I don't expect you to be perfect, but I want you to show progress. Leonardo leaned against the doorframe. I want to see how far you can go. Sophia took a deep breath. You like to test people, don't you? Leonardo gave a short smile. I just like to see what they're capable of. He left without saying anything else, leaving Sophia alone with her thoughts. She knew that this would be her first big test. And despite everything, she was not willing to fail. The next night, Sophia descended the stairs of the mansion, wearing a long, dark blue dress, with a discreet glow under the light of the imposing chandeliers. Her hair had been tied up in an elegant bun, and her lips bore a subtle shade of red. She barely recognized herself. Leonardo was waiting at the foot of the stairs, dressed in a well-fitting black suit. Seeing her, his eyes scanned every detail of his new version. Not bad, he commented, adjusting the knob on his jacket. Sophia lifted her chin. I'd say the same about you, but I think you're used to compliments. Leonardo smiled from the side, extending his arm to her. Let's go. On the way to the party, Sophia tried to hide her anxiety. Vivian's words echoed in her mind. Straight posture, confident eyes. Don't reveal insecurity. The car parked in front of a luxurious building, where a red carpet stretched to the entrance. Cameras flashed. Photographers waited anxiously for the guests. Sophia's heart raced. I didn't sign a contract for that, he whispered to Leonardo. You signed a contract to be my wife, and wives of men like me show up at events like this. Before she could protest, he grabbed her hand and led her out of the car. The buzz around was instantaneous. Eyes turned to her. Murmurs arose among the guests. Who is that? Where did she come from? Sophia took a deep breath and lifted her face, ignoring the judgmental looks. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was even more sophisticated. Huge chandeliers hung from the ceiling, finely decorated tables filled the space, and waiters circulated serving glasses of champagne. Leonardo led her to a group of businessmen. He smiled, shook hands, and exchanged formal greetings. Sophia remained silent, watching. So, Leonardo, Introduce us to your wife. The phrase came loaded with sarcasm. A tall, grey-haired man cast a curious glance at Sophia. Leonardo smiled without hesitation. This is Sophia. Sophia met the man's eyes and, in an act of courage, reached out. Nice to meet you. The businessmen exchanged glances with each other, surprised by his attitude. But no one dared to openly disrespect it. The evening continued with boring conversations about business and investments. Sophia remained attentive, trying to absorb everything around her. When he thought no one was watching, he quietly stepped out into the garden. The fresh air was a relief. She leaned against the balcony railing, closing her eyes for a moment. Tired of high society? Leonardo's voice made her open her eyes. He approached, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He held one out to her. You did better than I expected. Sophia took the glass but did not drink. I'm not as fragile as you think. Leonardo watched it for a moment, as if he were trying to decipher it. I never said it was. She looked away, staring at the city lights in the distance. In the end, all of this still looks like theatre. Leonardo leaned against the balcony next to her. Because it is. And those who know how to act better are the ones who win. Sophia felt a shiver run down her spine. And you? Still playing? Leonardo looked at her sideways, a mysterious smile on his lips. Always. Sophia took a deep breath. I knew I couldn't trust him completely, but at the same time, he began to realize that maybe that game could be played by 2. The night went on, and when they returned to the mansion, Sophia felt exhausted but satisfied. He had faced critical eyes, veiled comments, and the weight of a new identity, and, against all expectations, he had survived. When she lay down in bed, she felt something different. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't just the lost girl of the streets. She was changing. But was that a good thing? The first light of the morning invaded Sophia's room when she opened her eyes, feeling her body heavy after the intense night at the event. The faint smell of lavender permeated the soft sheets, a luxury she was not yet used to. He turned over in bed, staring at the ornate ceiling. Even after days of living there, Leonardo's mansion still seemed to him a scenario far from his reality. He sighed, sitting on the edge of the mattress. His gaze wandered over the huge wardrobe of mirrored doors. Inside, expensive dresses, jewelry, and designer shoes awaited her. Pieces of a costume that didn't really belong to him. But what bothered her most was not the environment, but the growing sense that something inside her was changing. From the moment he signed that contract, he was sure that it would only be a temporary game. He would survive the 3 months, take the money, and move on with his life. But now, everything seemed more complicated. A light touch on the door pulled her out of her reverie. Come in. Marta appeared holding a breakfast tray. Mr. Leonardo asked me to let you know that today you will have an important appointment. Sophia arched an eyebrow. What kind of commitment? He will explain it himself. Sophia sighed. Since that agreement had begun, not a day had passed without new demands being made. After a long shower, she put on an elegant ensemble and went down to the main room. Leonardo was already waiting for her, sitting in a leather armchair, analyzing some papers. When he saw her, he put down his documents and gestured for her to come closer. Today, you're going to get to know the company. Sophia frowned. Your company? Yes. I want you to understand what it means to live in this world. She crossed her arms. And what exactly do I have to do with it? Leonardo stood up, adjusting the lapel of his suit. You are my wife, albeit temporary. People will expect me to know at least the basics about my business. Sophia held back the urge to roll her eyes. What if I don't want to? Leonardo smiled, one of those smiles loaded with meaning. Then you'll miss an excellent opportunity to learn. Sophia narrowed her eyes. He knew exactly how to pique her curiosity. Without saying anything else, she took her bag and followed Leonardo to the car. Leonardo's corporate building was a tower of glass and steel that reflected sunlight like a giant mirror. As she entered, Sophia felt the gazes on her. Employees analyzed her discreetly, trying to understand who the woman next to the powerful businessman was. In the elevator, Leonardo remained silent, but Sophia knew he was watching her reaction. Are you impressed? He asked after a few seconds. Sophia shrugged. I've seen more inviting places. Leonardo let out a brief laugh. Welcome to the business world. When the elevator doors opened, they entered a large, sophisticated room. On the main wall, huge windows offered a privileged view of the city. "This is my office." Sophia walked through the space, analyzing every detail. Everything was perfectly organized, with no sign of mess or improvisation, the reflection of a man who always liked to have everything under control. Before he could say anything, a tall, gray-haired man entered the room. "Leonardo, we have a problem with the merger." Leonardo turned around immediately. "What happened?" The man hesitated when he noticed Sophia's presence. "Can we talk privately?" Leonardo crossed his arms. "You can talk in front of her." Sophia raised her eyebrows, surprised by the statement. The executive cleared his throat before continuing. "The press found out about the details of the contract and are beginning to question our intentions. If we don't speak out, investors may pull back." Leonardo ran his hand through his hair, clearly annoyed. Sophia watched the scene in silence. For the first time, she saw a side of Leonardo that she didn't know, a man under pressure. He had always seemed untouchable, as if nothing could shake him. But there, faced with a real problem, his absolute control showed cracks. "We need to act fast," Leonardo said, turning to the executive. "Schedule a press conference." The man nodded and hurried away. When they were alone again, Sophia crossed her arms. "It seems like you don't have everything under control after all." Leonardo let out a tired sigh. "Do you think business is just luxury and power? You have to make tough decisions every day." Sophia took a step forward. "And have you ever wondered if these decisions are the right ones?" Leonardo stared at her, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Sophia rested her hands on the table. "You always act like you can manipulate everything around you. But what if, for a moment, you can't?" Leonardo remained silent for a few moments. Then he smiled in the corner. "You ask interesting questions." Sophia realized that for the first time she had managed to destabilize him. At that moment, he understood something important. Leonardo was not as unshakable as he pretended to be. The company's main hall was packed. Journalists' cameras and microphones were positioned, waiting for Leonardo's every word. The buzz grew as the minutes passed, and Sophia, leaning discreetly against one of the side walls, watched intently. He didn't understand much about the business world, but he knew that at that moment Leonardo was being tested. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and walked to the pulpit. As soon as he positioned himself, the noise stopped. Everyone was anxiously waiting. "Good afternoon." His voice sounded firm, but Sophia noticed the tension hidden in his tone. Leonardo began to speak, explaining the situation of the company's merger and the rumors that were circulating in the media. Her words were well chosen, calculated to convey confidence, but Sophia noticed something that most wouldn't, a little hesitation in her voice. It wasn't an obvious weakness, but for someone watching Leonardo closely, it was clear that he was bothered. The man who always seemed to have everything under control was now dealing with a situation that he couldn't just manipulate to his advantage. A journalist raised his hand. "Mr. Vasquez, this merger is rumored to hurt small investors and lower-level employees of the company. How do you respond to this?" Leonardo kept his stance firm. "Our priority has always been sustainable growth and valuing our employees. Any decision made will be for the good of the company and everyone involved." A generic answer, calculated. Sophia crossed her arms, observing the reactions around her. The journalist insisted. "So can you guarantee that there will be no layoffs?" There was a brief silence, small but noticeable. "We guarantee that all efforts are being made so that the transition occurs in the best possible way." Sophia sighed. Another answer that said nothing. The press conference continued for a few more minutes, until Leonardo finally ended with a formal thanks. As soon as he left the lectern, journalists dispersed and executives approached to congratulate him. Sophie, however, remained where she was. When he finally got rid of the formalities and walked over to her, his expression was heavy. "Let's go." Without saying anything else, the two left the company and got into the car. The silence during the journey back to the mansion was heavy. Leonardo stared at the city through the window, his jaw clenched. "You hesitated," Sophia said, breaking the silence. He turned to her, frowning. "What?" "During the press conference, when they asked about the layoffs, you hesitated." Leonardo looked away, letting out a sigh. "There are no guarantees in business." Sophia kept her eyes fixed on him. "And doesn't that bother you?" Leonardo was silent for a moment before answering. I do what needs to be done. She crossed her arms. Even if it means harming people. He turned to face her. Do you think business is about feelings? Sophia gave a wry laugh. I think business is about choices. And yours says a lot about who you are. Leonardo did not answer. He just looked away and went back to facing the city. When they arrived at the mansion, he got out of the car without waiting for her. Sophia watched him hurriedly enter, realizing that his words affected him more than he let on. She entered the house and walked up the stairs in silence. Deep down, I knew that conversation would not end there. The next morning, Sophia was awakened by a firm knock on the door. Come in. Marta emerged holding a tray of coffee. Mr. Leonardo asked you to get ready. He wants to take her to a place. Sophia arched her eyebrows. Where? He didn't say. He only asked that it be ready in an hour. Sophia sighed and stood up, feeling the weight of the previous night still on her shoulders. After getting dressed, she went down to the entrance of the mansion, where Leonardo was already waiting for her next to the car. Shall we? He said, opening the door for her. Sophia hesitated for a second before entering. During the journey, Leonardo remained silent. His gaze was distant, lost in thought. The urban landscape was gradually replaced by simpler streets, with old buildings and uneven sidewalks. Sophia frowned. Where are we going? Leonardo parked the car and left without responding. Sophia followed him, feeling the cold wind hit her face. It was only when they turned the corner that she realized they were in a humble neighborhood with small houses and street commerce. Children played on the sidewalks, while elderly people talked while sitting on plastic chairs. In the middle of the street there was a small orphanage. Leonardo walked to the gate and was greeted by an elderly woman who smiled at the sight of him. Mr. Vasquez, what a good surprise. He shook her hand. How are things, Mrs. Helena? Sophia watched the scene with surprise. She never imagined Leonardo there. Donna Helena invited them in. The orphanage was simple but welcoming. Children ran around the courtyard, some playing with time-worn toys. Sophia looked at Leonardo, waiting for him to explain the reason for that visit. I've been funding this place for years, he said, as if reading his thoughts. Sophia blinked, surprised. You? He nodded. I grew up here. The revelation hit her like a shock. Did you live in this orphanage? Leonardo nodded, looking around. My mother died when I was 5 years old. My father was never present. I was raised here until I got a scholarship and left to build my life. Sophia didn't know what to say. The image he had of Leonardo began to crack. Behind the cold and calculating man there was a story she did not know. Donna Helena smiled. Mr. Leonardo has always helped us. He never forgot where he came from. Sophia looked at him with new eyes. Maybe, just maybe, there was a lot more to him than she imagined. Sophia was still absorbing the revelations of the previous day. Leonardo, the man she knew as arrogant and impenetrable, had grown up in foster care. That detail changed everything. Not because it justified his coldness, but because it showed that he had fought to get where he was. That morning, when she went down to the cafe, she found Leonardo already sitting at the table, reading a report. Her face kept the same serious expression as always, but Sophia noticed something different in her posture, as if the conversation in the orphanage had moved him more than he wanted to admit. Without saying anything, she sat down and began to eat. The silence between the two was dense, full of unspoken words. It was Leonardo who broke the tension. You never told me how you ended up on the street. Sophia stopped, surprised by the question. She never liked to talk about the past. But after what he had learned about Leonardo, perhaps it would be fair to share a little of his own story. I had a normal life. Family, school, everything seemed right until it was no more. Leonardo closed the report, giving it his full attention. What happened? Sophia took a deep breath. My father got sick and the bills piled up. We lost the house. After he died, my mother did everything to support us, but an accident took her away from me as well. She looked away, fixing herself on the cup of coffee in her hands. After that, it didn't take long for me to end up on the street. Leonardo was silent. He knew what it was like to lose, but he had never stopped to think about how Sophia had gotten here. Did you try to get help? Sophia let out a humorless laugh. Many times, but people see homelessness as invisible. Nobody wants to give a chance to someone who has already been discarded by the system. Leonardo leaned back in his chair, reflecting on his words. That's why you always look at me like I'm part of the problem. She looked up at him. You represent everything that made me be ignored. The money, the power, the ease of getting what you want. Leonardo did not look away. What if I told you that money doesn't always solve everything? Sophia arched an eyebrow. Do you really believe that? He let out a sigh. The orphanage where I grew up received donations, but that didn't change the fact that children spent nights crying because they missed a family that would never return. Money kept the place running, but it didn't fill the void. Sophia never expected to hear something like this from him. Then why do you still act like money is everything? Leonardo was thoughtful. Because it's easier. The answer caught her off guard. What do you mean? It's easier to deal with numbers than with people. It is simpler to sign a check than to face realities that I cannot change. Sophia studied him for a moment. For the first time, he saw that behind his fortune and coldness, there was a man who avoided feeling. She put the cup down on the table. Maybe it's time for you to get out of your office and see how things really work. Leonardo arched an eyebrow. And how do you suggest that I do that? Sophia broke into a mischievous smile. Let me show you a side of the city you've never seen. He seemed to hesitate, but then let out a faint smile. Right. Surprise me. The black car slid through the city's busy streets, but this time not toward the skyscrapers and luxurious restaurants. Sophia had insisted that if Leonardo wanted to understand the difference between money and real values, he needed to see it with his own eyes. The destination was a community center in a lower middle-class neighborhood. As soon as they parked, Leonardo looked around, suspicious. The place was simple but well-maintained. Children played outside while adults organized boxes of food and clothes for donation. What exactly happens here? He asked. Sophia smiled. People help each other. No contracts, no transactions, no interest. They entered the main hall where volunteers prepared meals to distribute to those in need. A middle-aged woman in a flour-smeared apron came to greet them with a warm smile. Sophia, how good to see you again. Sophia hugged her. Miss Clara, this is Leonardo. The woman reached out to him. So you're her famous husband. Leonardo shook the woman's hand, noting that contrary to what happened at business events, no one there seemed impressed by her presence. Let's put you to work, Clara said excitedly. Sophia took an apron and threw one to Leonardo. Are you ready to get your hands dirty, Mr. Tycoon? He rolled his eyes, but put on his apron. They spent the next few hours helping to distribute food and organize donations. Leonardo seemed out of place at first, not knowing exactly how to act, but as time went on, he began to relax. At one point, a boy of about 10 years old pulled the sleeve of his coat. Are you one of those rich men who appear on TV? Leonardo looked at him, surprised. Why do you ask? The boy shrugged. Because you look a little lost. Sophia laughed, and even Leonardo let out a faint smile. I think you're right. The afternoon passed faster than he imagined. For the first time in a long time, Leonardo found himself in an environment where his fortune didn't matter. When they left the community center, the sun was already setting. In the car, Sophia watched him in silence. He looked thoughtful, as if he was still processing what he had just experienced. Are you okay? Leonardo looked away from the window and stared at her. Why do you care so much about this place? Sophia took a deep breath. Because when I was on the street, people like Mrs. Clara were the only ones who reached out to me. I learned that someone's value is not in what they have, but in what they choose to do with what they have. Leonardo was silent. She touched the exact spot he was trying to ignore. At that moment, she realized that Sophia had not only survived poverty, but had also refused to let it define who she was. And for the first time, he asked himself, what really defines me? The car moved silently through the city streets, but the silence inside it was almost deafening. Leonardo kept his eyes fixed on the window, his expression indecipherable. Ever since they left the community center, he seemed immersed in thoughts that Sophia couldn't fully decipher. She, on the other hand, felt a mixture of satisfaction and restlessness. For the first time, Leonardo had experienced a world he had never considered important. He had seen the real impact that small actions could have, an impact that no amount of money could replace. But had it really affected him? Sophia could not resist and broke the silence. You're quiet. Leonardo blinked a few times, as if awakening from his own thoughts, before turning to her. Today was different. Sophia arched an eyebrow. Different how? He took a deep breath, searching for the right words. I spent my whole life believing that money solved everything. If I needed something, I bought it. If he wanted to solve a problem, he paid someone to solve it. But there—" He paused. "That had nothing to do with money." Sophia smiled slightly. "Exactly." Leonardo turned his face to the window again. "When I was a child in the orphanage, I dreamed of the day when I would have enough money to never worry about anything again. But no one warned me that this did not mean that I would be satisfied." Sophia settled on the bench, interested. "And what did it mean then?" Leonardo gave a corner smile, but there was no humor in him. "It meant I always wanted more, and the more I had, the less I knew why I wanted it." Sophia was silent for a few moments, absorbing his words. "Maybe the problem was never the money. Maybe the problem is what you did with it." He turned to face her, and she realized that he was really listening. "And what do you suggest I do with him?" Sophia smiled slightly. "Use it for something that really matters." Leonardo did not immediately respond, but for the first time he seemed to genuinely consider the idea. Back at the mansion, Leonardo disappeared into the office as soon as they arrived. Sophia imagined that he would return to his routine, sunk in numbers and meetings as he always did. However, the next morning he surprised her. "I want you to show me more places like that community center." Sophia, who was about to take a sip of coffee, stopped in the middle of the movement. "You want—" "What?" Leonardo crossed his arms. "I want to see more. I want to understand how these people live." Sophia blinked, trying to process that new information. "Are you sure about that?" He nodded. "You said money isn't everything. I want to see this with my own eyes." She studied his expression, looking for any hint of sarcasm or irony, but all she found was seriousness. "Right," she said finally, "but don't expect a comfortable tour." Leonardo smiled from the side. "I'm prepared." In the following weeks, Sophia took Leonardo to several places he would never have imagined stepping on. They went to shelters, precarious public schools, and small NGOs that struggled to survive with few resources. Each visit was a shock to him. Leonardo had always been surrounded by luxury, millionaire dinners, and meetings where the only objective was to increase already immense fortunes. Now he saw a completely different world, and to his own surprise, it affected him more than he expected. In one of the shelters, an older man with grey hair and worn clothes shook Leonardo's hand firmly. "You must be one of the rich people who appeared on TV." Leonardo smiled humorlessly. "I am." The man nodded. "Then tell me, what is a man with so much money doing here?" Leonardo hesitated. He himself did not yet know the answer to this. It was Sophia who answered for him. "He's trying to understand what really matters." The man laughed lightly but not mockingly. "Then I hope you learn something valuable. Because out there, the world you live in can give you everything but purpose." That phrase stayed in Leonardo's mind for the rest of the day. One night while they were in the garden of the mansion, Sophia noticed that Leonardo seemed more distant than usual. She watched him for a few moments before speaking. "You've been thinking a lot lately." Leonardo nodded without taking his eyes off the starry sky. "I do." Sophia waited for him to continue, and he finally sighed. "For years I thought my only mission was to accumulate more, build, expand, dominate. But now—" He paused. "Now I wonder what for." Sophia smiled softly. "You're starting to understand." Leonardo turned to her. "What if I want to change?" She arched an eyebrow. "Then begin." He was silent for a few seconds before asking, "Would you help me?" Sophia felt her heart race at that question. "Yes." Leonardo took a deep breath and looked at the horizon. "So let's start something new. Something that really makes sense." The next morning, Leonardo gathered his team and made an unexpected announcement. "From now on, part of the company's profits will be allocated to social projects. I want to create a foundation that helps people to get out of poverty and to have real opportunities." The looks in the room varied between shock and confusion. "Mr. Vasquez," one of the executives began, "this could affect our investments." Leonardo leaned over the table with a determined look. "And I'm willing to take that risk." Sophia, who was watching everything from the corner of the room, felt something unprecedented grow inside her. Admiration. That night, as they walked along the balcony of the mansion, Leonardo suddenly stopped. "You changed the way I see the world." Sophia stared at him. "I only showed you what you refused to see." Leonardo smiled. "Even so, Thank you. For the first time, Sophia saw something different in him. He was no longer just a powerful man. Now he was becoming a man with purpose. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see him with different eyes. The routine at the mansion has completely changed. Leonardo's business meetings now shared space with visits to charities, and Sophia, without realizing it, had become his partner in these moments. The man who used to be only concerned with numbers was now learning to see people, but something even more unexpected was happening. Sophia and Leonardo, who previously seemed like two opposites in a cold game of interests, began to see each other in a different way. Love does not come as a sudden explosion. It's not an overwhelming blow that transforms everything in an instant. Love, when real, grows slowly, in small actions, in subtle gestures, in conversations that once seemed banal, and that was exactly what was happening between them. One morning, Sophia woke up later than usual. The sun was already shining in the room when she came downstairs, finding Leonardo in the garden. He was without a jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows, watching the gardeners as they moved the dirt. Sophia crossed her arms, leaning against the door. "Since when have you been interested in gardening?" Leonardo looked at her and smiled from the side. "Since I realized I've never paid attention to what's going on around me." Sophia arched an eyebrow and walked closer. "And what exactly are you trying to learn here?" He took a handful of dirt and let it run through his fingers. "That some things take time to grow." Sophia frowned, analyzing him. "Was that a metaphor?" Leonardo gave a low laugh. "Maybe," she sighed, picking up a flower that had fallen to the ground. "Not everything can be controlled, Leonardo." He watched her for a moment before replying, "I know." For an instant, his eyes carried something different, something that made Sophia feel a strange warmth in her chest. She looked away, trying to ignore the unexpected sensation. That night brought a different event. Leonardo had been invited to a charity dinner, and, like his wife, Sophia was to accompany him. But this time something was different. Since the agreement began, Sophia dressed elegantly out of obligation. But that night, as she stared at her reflection in the mirror, she realized she wanted to look good. Not because of pressure, but because she wanted Leonardo to notice her. She wore a red velvet dress just right with a discreet and elegant neckline. Her hair, tied in a loose bun, let a few strands fall around her face. When she went down the stairs, Leonardo was already waiting for her. But for the first time, he seemed to lose his breath at the sight of her. His eyes scanned every detail, and for a brief moment, he forgot how to breathe. Sophia noticed the hesitation in his gaze and felt a strange pleasure when she realized the effect she had caused. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice a little hoarser than usual. She smiled. "I thought you weren't impressed by dresses." Leonardo smiled from the side, opening the door for her to get into the car. "Maybe I underestimated their power. Dinner was a test." Sophia was already used to high society events, but that night she noticed something different. Before, she felt out of place, as if she didn't belong to that world. But this time, he walked with more confidence, and Leonardo realized that. "You're more at ease," he commented as they danced in the lighted hall. Sophia looked him in the eye. "Maybe because now I know I don't need to prove anything to anyone." Leonardo squeezed her waist slightly. "I like that." For a brief moment, the world around him disappeared. The music, the guests, the lights, everything disappeared. Only the two of them remained. But the moment was interrupted when a guest approached to greet Leonardo, breaking the invisible connection that had formed. Sophia walked away, taking a deep breath. What was happening to her? And more importantly, what was going on between them? Back at the mansion, Sophia rushed in, trying to avoid any conversation with Leonardo. But he was faster. "Sophia." She stopped but didn't turn around. "What was that today?" She closed her eyes for a moment before answering. "I don't know." Leonardo took a step forward. "I think you know." Sophia finally turned around, crossing her arms. "What do you want me to say, Leonardo? That something is changing? That I don't see you the same way anymore?" He moved even closer, his expression intense. "Yes." Sophia felt her heart race. She knew he felt the same. But admitting it meant crossing a dangerous line. She took a deep breath. "This is not part of the agreement." Leonardo smiled slightly. "I know." Sophia looked at him, her gaze charged with doubts and conflicting emotions. "So, She said the only thing she could at that moment. "Good evening, Leonardo." And he went upstairs, leaving him alone in the hall of the mansion with the echo of his own questions. Dawn brought an eerie silence to the mansion. Sophia woke up with her heart racing, remembering the night before. Leonardo's intense gaze, the way he held her in the dance, the moment when they almost admitted that something was going on between them. She felt vulnerable. I didn't want to give in to something that wasn't part of the plan. After all, that marriage had an expiration date. Sighing, she stood up and put on a silk dressing gown she had found in the closet. When he went down to the cafe, he found the table set as usual. However, Leonardo was not there. Marta, the housekeeper, noticed his confused expression and smiled slightly. "Mr. Leonardo left early today." Sophia arched an eyebrow. "Where to?" He didn't say. He only asked that they not wait for him for coffee. Sophia sat at the table, trying to ignore the slight disappointment she felt. Maybe it would be better that way. Perhaps it was a sign that everything should continue as it was. The day passed in a monotonous way. Sophia tried to concentrate on etiquette classes and preparations for a new gala event, but her mind always went back to Leonardo's absence. When night fell, he still hadn't returned. Sophia was already in the room when she heard the noise of the car at the entrance of the mansion. Against his own will, he discreetly went to the corridor to observe. Leonardo entered through the front door, loosening his tie. His face looked tired, but at the same time, there was something different about him. He climbed the stairs slowly, not realizing that Sophia was watching him. When he passed her, he stopped. "Spying on my arrival?" Sophia crossed her arms. "You've been missing all day. It's strange." Leonardo smiled from the side. "Did you miss me?" She snorted. "Don't be convinced." Leonardo took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "Because if you did, I can tell you that I spent the whole day thinking about you." Sophia blinked, surprised. "What?" He sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I tried to distract myself, but every moment of my day, his voice, his words, and his looks were on my mind." Sophia felt butterflies in her stomach. "Leonardo." "I know," he interrupted. "I know that this was not part of the plan. I know it was supposed to be just a contract. But something has changed," Sophia swallowed. "And what do you want to do with it?" Leonardo looked at her with intensity. "Find out." The silence between them was charged with tension. Sophia felt her whole body on alert, as if she were about to cross a boundary that could not be undone. Then, unexpectedly, she took a step back. "Good evening, Leonardo," and she entered the room, closing the door before he said anything else. In the following days, both acted as if nothing had happened, but something was different. The looks took longer than necessary. The accidental touches generated electricity in the air. Casual conversations carried hidden meanings. And Sophia hated to admit it, but she was starting to enjoy it. Until one day, while they were at an event, something unexpected happened. It was a business cocktail, full of important businessmen. Leonardo and Sophia were talking to some investors when an elegant woman approached. "Leonardo." Her voice was soft but loaded with a suggestive tone. Sophia immediately realized that it was someone from his past. Leonardo turned and smiled slightly. "Charlotte." Sophia remained silent, just watching. The woman put a hand on Leonardo's arm in a casual but intimate way. "It's been a long time, dear. You're gone." Sophia felt something uncomfortable growing inside her. Leonardo discreetly moved away from the touch and kept a neutral tone. "Life has gotten a little busier." Charlotte smiled seductively. "I heard you got married. But I thought this was just a rumor." Sophia felt the woman's attention turn to her, as if she was finally analyzing her. "You must be Sophia." Sophia lifted her chin, keeping her composure. "Yes." Charlotte smiled almost condescendingly. "I hope you're enjoying your new life." Sophia noticed the provocation hidden in those words. Leonardo, on the other hand, seemed slightly annoyed. "It was good to see you, Charlotte. Now, if you will excuse us." He took hold of Sophia's hand and pulled her gently away from the woman. As they walked away, Sophia let out a sigh. "What was that?" Leonardo ran his hand over his face. Charlotte was someone from the past. Sophia crossed her arms. "And it seemed like she wanted to be part of your gift." Leonardo looked at her, analyzing her expression. "Did that bother you?" Sophia hesitated. "I'm not used to this kind of situation." Leonardo moved a little closer, his voice getting lower. If it had been the other way around, if a man from your past had come along and treated you the same way Charlotte treated me, would you feel comfortable? Sophia bit her lower lip. I don't think so. Leonardo smiled slightly. So now you understand how I feel. Sophia felt a strange warmth in her chest. They were starting to care about each other in a way they could no longer ignore. Later, already in the mansion, Sophia was sitting on the porch watching the night. Leonardo appeared, bringing 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one and sat down next to her. You look different today, Sophia sighed. Maybe because today I realized something. And what's wrong? She turned to him. That we're past the point where we could pretend nothing is happening. Leonardo kept his eyes on hers seriously. I know. The silence between them was loaded with meaning, and for the first time Sophia was not afraid of that. The last few months had transformed everything. What started as a simple contract was now something else entirely. Sophia never imagined that her life would change so much by accepting that absurd agreement. She should just survive the 3 months, take the money and get on with her life. But now the deadline was coming to an end, and the idea of simply walking away seemed impossible. The mansion was no longer a strange place. The routine with Leonardo had become familiar, and what was once a cold and calculated relationship was now something real. But even so, she couldn't ignore the truth, that marriage began with a bet and what was going on between them now. Would it be strong enough to overcome this? That morning, Sophia woke up feeling a weight in her chest. The sun poured in through the half-open curtains, softly illuminating the luxurious room. But for the first time, that comfort didn't feel right. He quickly dressed and went downstairs. In the office, he found Leonardo, as always, concentrated, analyzing documents, a cup of coffee by his side. He looked up as he saw her enter. Good morning? Sophia took a deep breath. We need to talk. Leonardo frowned, immediately catching the serious tone of his voice. He dropped his pen on the table and leaned back in his chair. I'm listening. She hesitated for a moment, feeling a tight knot in her stomach. But then he forced the words out. The contract is coming to an end. Leonardo's gaze remained fixed on hers. There was no surprise, just an apparent calm, as if he was already expecting it. I know. Sophia closed her hands into fists. So, what happens now? Leonardo stood up slowly, walking towards her. I should ask you that. Sophia blinked, surprised. What? He stood in front of her, his hands in his jacket pockets. What do you want, Sophia? The question hit her hard. She wanted to respond. She wanted to scream that she couldn't just keep pretending that this marriage was still just a contract. But the truth was that admitting what she felt meant giving up all the resistance she had maintained from the beginning. It meant trusting Leonardo, and that still scared her. I don't know. His voice came out low, almost a whisper. Leonardo took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Yes, you know. He just doesn't want to admit it. She looked away. Do you think we can just forget how it all started? He raised his hand, gently touching her face. I don't want to forget. I want to move on. With you. Sophia's heart raced. But how do you know if this is real? How do we know if we're not just getting used to each other? Leonardo smiled slightly. If this were just a habit, you wouldn't be here right now, fighting what you feel. Sophia closed her eyes for a moment. I need time. Leonardo sighed but nodded. Then I'll give you time. She opened her eyes and found him looking at her with a sincerity that disarmed her. But promise me one thing, Sophia. What? Don't run away before you find out the answer. Sophia felt a knot tighten in her chest even more, because deep down, he knew that there was no way to escape. The night had been long. Sophia walked around the room, unable to close her eyes. Time was running out. Within a few hours, the contract that united her and Leonardo would cease to exist. Would everything go back to the way it was before? Would she just walk out the door, take the money, and start her life over on her own? It was what she wanted from the beginning, but now as she looked around the room, she felt like she couldn't pretend that nothing had changed anymore. Because the truth was simple. She was no longer the same woman. Sophia had entered that house with only one goal, to survive the 3 months, secure her future, and disappear. But throughout that time, she discovered that her life didn't have to be just a lonely battle, and more than that, she discovered that when she was with Leonardo, she didn't feel lost. But did he feel the same? Sighing, she put on a light robe and left the room in silence. The house was plunged into darkness, with only a few soft lights illuminating the hallways. When she walked through the office door, she realized that he was still awake. Leonardo was sitting at the table, a glass of half-finished whiskey by his side. He didn't seem to be working. Instead, he stared at an envelope in his hands, as if he were considering something important. Sophia entered without knocking. Leonardo looked up, surprised to see her there. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, putting the envelope down on the table. She shook her head. "The contract ends tomorrow." Leonardo nodded slowly. "I know." The silence between them was dense. Sophia approached the table, resting her hands on the polished wood. "So what happens now?" Leonardo watched her for a long moment before answering. "That's up to you." Sophia frowned. "What?" He stood up, walking slowly until he stopped in front of her. "I spent my whole life believing that I could control everything, that money solved any problem. But you—" He hesitated for a second before continuing. "You showed me that some things can't be bought." Sophia felt her heart race. "What are you saying, Leonardo?" He took a deep breath. "I'm saying I don't want this to end, but I need to know if you want the same." She was silent, absorbing those words. That's what I wanted to hear. But at the same time, there was still fear within her. "Do you think we can just forget how it all started?" she asked, her voice a little hesitant. Leonardo smiled slightly. "I don't want to forget. I want to move on. With you." Sophia looked away, trying to organize her thoughts. "What if all this is a mistake?" Leonardo gently touched her face, forcing her to face him. "So it's a mistake I'm willing to make for the rest of my life." Sophia let out a short, nervous laugh. "You always have an answer for everything," he shrugged. "Only when it comes to you." The silence between them was intense, and deep down, Sophia already knew her answer. A new choice. The next morning, Sophia woke up decided. He got dressed and went downstairs for breakfast. This time his heart wasn't heavy. She found Leonardo in the same place as always, at the dinner table, with a cup of coffee in his hand. When he saw her, he closed the newspaper he was reading and leaned forward slightly. "So?" he asked bluntly. Sophia took a deep breath and, without saying anything, sat down at the table. She took one of the toasts, buttered it calmly, and began to eat. Leonardo watched her, waiting. Then she finally spoke. "I'm not going anywhere." He blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" Sophia stared at him with determination. "Yes." Leonardo relaxed, letting out a slight sigh of relief. "Then there's nothing more to say," Sophia smiled. "No. Now, we just keep going." The contract that united them no longer existed. Now what held them together was something much stronger, the love they had built, day after day. Months later, Sophia's life had changed completely. She was no longer the woman who slept on the streets, nor the one who entered Leonardo's mansion only for money. Now she had a purpose, and by his side, he had a man who learned that true wealth was not in money, but in the choices he made. Leonardo had also changed. He was no longer just the arrogant and calculating businessman. He found a new meaning for his fortune by investing in projects that really helped people. One night, as they walked together on the balcony of the mansion, Leonardo stopped and looked at her. "Are you still afraid that you're making a mistake?" Sophia smiled slightly. "If it's a mistake, then it's the best I've ever made." Leonardo held her hand. "So let's keep making mistakes together." The wind blew gently around them, and for the first time Sophia felt that she was exactly where she should be. She was no longer a woman fighting alone. Now she had a home, and more importantly, he had someone by his side. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you liked it, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications so you don't miss any of our stories. See you in the next videos.